The telegram arrived on the morning. Olivia Whitmore planned to shoot herself. She stood in the doorway of her farmhouse, the weight of her father's old revolver heavy in her apron pocket, staring at the drought-cracked earth that stretched toward the horizon. The Idaho Territory sun beat down mercilessly on what remained of her wheat fields, turning everything the color of old bones. 23 years old, and she was about to lose everything her parents had built, everything they had died protecting just 2 years prior, when fever swept through Kennewick like God's own wrath. The messenger boy from town handed her the folded paper with dirt-stained fingers. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat before spurring his horse back toward the main road. Olivia unfolded the telegram with trembling hands, expecting another notice from the bank, another threat from Clayton Morris, who wanted her land to expand his cattle empire. Instead, she read words that made no sense at all. "Arriving Wednesday, stop, will marry you to save farm, stop, no condition, stop, Donovan Irving, stop." She read it 3 times, her mind struggling to connect the name to a memory. Then it hit her like a physical blow. Donovan Irving. The railroad worker who had spent 2 months in Kennewick 5 years ago when the tracks were being laid through the territory. He had been 19 then, she 18, and they had shared exactly 4 conversations, all of them brief and proper. She remembered a tall young man with dark hair and careful manners who had asked her father's permission to walk her home from church once. Just once, because the railroad had moved on and so had he, and now he was coming to marry her. Olivia looked down at the telegram again, searching for some trick or cruel joke, but the paper was real and the message clear. Somehow, impossibly, Donovan Irving knew about her troubles and was coming to help. She pulled the revolver from her pocket and walked it back into the house, placing it in the drawer where it belonged. Whatever happened next, she would face it alive. Wednesday came faster than she expected. Olivia spent 2 days cleaning the farmhouse until her hands were raw, repairing her only good dress, and trying to understand why a man she barely knew would offer such an enormous sacrifice. Marriage was forever, and her farm was drowning in debt. What kind of person rode into certain financial ruin for a woman he had spoken to 4 times 5 years ago? She was feeding her 3 remaining chickens when she heard the horse approaching. Olivia straightened, brushing grain dust from her skirt, and watched as a rider crested the hill that separated her property from the main road into town. Even from a distance, she recognized something in the way he sat the saddle, straight-backed and steady. As he drew closer, she saw how much he had changed and how much he had stayed the same. Donovan Irving was no longer a railroad worker. He wore the clothes of a cowboy now, practical and worn from hard use. His hat was pulled low against the sun, but when he removed it as he approached, she saw a face that was both familiar and foreign. He had been a boy before. Now he was a man, weathered and lean, with lines around his eyes that spoke of too much sun and not enough easy living. "Miss Whitmore," he said, dismounting with an easy grace. His voice was deeper than she remembered, rough around the edges. "Mr. Irving." She folded her hands in front of her, trying to appear calm even though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I received your telegram." "I figured you did, seeing as I'm standing here and you have not shot me for trespassing." A faint smile touched his lips, but it did not reach his eyes. Up close, she could see exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "Why?" The question came out more bluntly than she intended. "Why would you offer to marry me? We do not even know each other." Donovan looked past her at the farmhouse, at the dying fields, at the whole sad picture of her failing homestead. When his gaze returned to her face, something in his expression made her breath catch. He looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, Because you are in trouble and I can help, he said simply. And because I need a reason to stay in one place. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have right now. He held her gaze steadily. I have money, Miss Whitmore. Enough to pay off your debts and keep this farm running. I am asking for a home in return. A legal reason to be here. That is all. Marriage is more than a legal arrangement. It can be whatever we agree it to be. His voice remained even, but she heard something desperate underneath the calm. I will not force anything on you. Separate rooms if you want. I will work the farm, pay the debts, and ask nothing except a place to belong. Olivia studied him carefully. He was hiding something, that much was obvious, but she saw no threat in him, only a bone-deep weariness that mirrored her own. You are running from something, she said quietly. Yes. He did not try to deny it. But not the law, if that is what worries you. I have not hurt anyone who did not deserve it, and I have paid every debt I owe except ones that cannot be paid with money. The sun beat down on both of them as they stood in the dusty yard, two desperate people considering a desperate solution. Olivia thought about the revolver in the drawer, about the bank notice that gave her 2 more weeks before foreclosure, about the endless lonely nights in a house full of ghosts. Mr. Morris has been pressuring me to sell, she said. He will not be happy about this. Clayton Morris, the cattle baron. Something sharp entered Donovan's expression. I know the type. He will get over his disappointment. He is a powerful man in Kennewick. I do not care. The flat certainty in Donovan's voice sent a shiver down her spine. Whatever he was running from had taught him not to fear powerful men. If we do this, I want honesty between us, Olivia said. I will not pry into your past, but I need to know you will not bring danger to my door. The danger I carry is the kind that stays inside a man. He met her eyes without flinching. It will not touch you. That is a promise. She should have said no. It was insane to marry a virtual stranger, to tie her fate to a man who admitted he was running from something. But Olivia thought about the alternative, about losing the farm her parents had carved from raw wilderness, about being forced to work in Clayton Morris's household as a servant or worse. She thought about the revolver and how close she had come to using it. We should see the preacher, she said. Relief washed over Donovan's face so completely that she glimpsed the scared young man underneath the weathered cowboy exterior. Thank you, he said, and the words sounded like a prayer. They rode into Kennewick together on his horse, Olivia seated behind him because her own horse had been sold 2 months ago to pay for feed. The town had not changed much in 5 years. The same wooden buildings lined the main street, the same dust hung in the air, the same faces watched from doorways and windows as they passed. But those faces registered surprise when they saw Olivia Whitmore riding double with a strange cowboy, headed toward the church at the end of town. Reverend Samuel looked even older than she remembered, his white hair thinner and his back more bent. He met them at the church door with questions in his eyes. Olivia, he said gently, what brings you to town? I need you to perform a marriage, Reverend. She kept her voice steady. Right now, if possible. The old preacher's gaze shifted to Donovan, assessing and worried. This seems sudden. It is, Olivia admitted, but it is also necessary. This is Donovan Irving. He was here 5 years ago with the railroad crew. He has asked me to marry him and I have accepted. Child, marriage is a sacred bond. It should not be entered into out of desperation. All the more reason to do it right, Donovan said quietly. With God's blessing and the law's recognition, Miss Whitmore deserves that much. Reverend Samuel looked between them for a long moment. Finally, he sighed. Come inside. We will need witnesses. The church was empty at midday on a Wednesday. The Reverend sent his wife to fetch 2 neighbors, and within an hour, Olivia found herself standing at the altar beside a man she barely knew, speaking vows that would bind them together for life. Donovan's hand was steady when he took hers. His voice did not waver as he promised to love and cherish her until death parted them. Olivia spoke her own vows and meant every word, even though she did not understand what she was feeling. This was a business arrangement, a practical solution to desperate circumstances. But when Donovan slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, something shifted inside her chest. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Samuel said. Donovan leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. His lips brushed hers with extraordinary gentleness, the kiss lasting only a moment before he stepped back. But Olivia felt the touch all the way to her bones. They signed the marriage certificate in the Reverend's study. Donovan's handwriting was surprisingly elegant, each letter carefully formed. When he pulled out a thick envelope of bills to pay the Reverend's fee, Olivia saw exactly how much money he was carrying. Enough to save her farm 3 times over. "Where did you get this?" she asked as they left the church. "Saved it," he said. "Working ranches from here to Texas. I have not spent much these past 5 years. You have been planning this." He helped her onto his horse before answering. "I have been planning something. Maybe this is what it was meant to be." They stopped at the bank on the way out of town. Olivia waited outside while Donovan went in to speak with Harold Peterson, the banker who had sent her so many threatening letters. She could see them through the window, could see Peterson's expression shift from skepticism to surprise to grudging respect as Donovan counted out bills on the desk. When he emerged 15 minutes later, Donovan handed her a receipt. "Your farm is paid in full. No more debt." Olivia stared at the paper, at the numbers that represented her freedom, and felt tears burn behind her eyes. "I do not know how to repay you. You already have." He mounted behind her this time, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. "You gave me a home." The ride back to the farm felt different somehow. Olivia was aware of every point where Donovan's body touched hers, of the steady rhythm of his breathing, of the strength in the arms that bracketed her safely. She was married now. This stranger was her husband. The reality of it settled over her like a heavy blanket, neither comfortable nor entirely unwelcome. The sun was setting by the time they reached the farmhouse. In the golden light, the place looked less desperate and more simply tired. Donovan dismounted first, then helped her down with careful courtesy. "I will tend to the horse," he said. "Is there a barn?" "What is left of one." She pointed toward the leaning structure behind the house. "I sold most of the animals to pay debts. There is not much in there now." "We will rebuild." He said it with quiet certainty, as if the matter was already decided. "Tomorrow I will ride to town and order supplies, but tonight maybe you could show me where I will be sleeping." Olivia led him into the house, suddenly conscious of how shabby everything looked. The furniture was worn, the floors needed scrubbing, the curtains were patched and faded. This was what she had brought to their marriage: debt and dust and a slowly dying dream. "This is my room," she said, stopping at the first door. "My parents' room is across the hall. I have not been in there since they died." Donovan set his saddlebag down outside the parents' room. "I will take this one if that is all right." Yes, relief and something else, something that might have been disappointment, flooded through her. "There should be linens in the chest." "I will make up the bed. I can do it." He caught her hand gently. "Olivia, we are married now, so I am going to use your given name. Is that all right?" The sound of her name in his rough voice sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Yes, and I will call you Donovan." "Good." He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes, transforming his entire face. For a moment she saw the young man he had been, earnest and kind beneath all the hard-won weariness. Now let me make my own bed, wife. You have done enough for one day." They ate a simple supper of beans and cornbread, sitting across from each other at the kitchen table. Olivia found herself studying her husband in the lamplight, trying to reconcile the stranger with the man she had just bound herself to. "Tell me about the railroad," she said finally. "What made you leave that work?" Donovan chewed slowly before answering. "The job moved around too much. After a while, all that motion stops feeling like freedom and starts feeling like running." He paused, turning his coffee cup in careful circles. "I wanted to put down roots somewhere. Remember what it feels like to know a place. So you worked ranches instead. Cattle drives mostly. Followed the herds north from Texas, then hired on with different outfits for the winter. Made good money, but it was still moving, still temporary." His eyes met hers across the table. "This is the first place I have chosen to stay since I left home." "Where is home?" he corrected gently. "Missouri, but everyone I knew there is gone now, no point going back." She heard the grief underneath his words and recognized it intimately. "I am sorry. So am I." He stood, collecting their plates. "But we have both lost people. Maybe we can help each other remember how to live with what remains." That night, Olivia lay in her bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person moving through the house. Donovan's footsteps crossed the hall. She heard the creak of her parents' old bed frame, the rustle of blankets settling. Then silence. She stared at the ceiling and tried to understand what she had done. She was married to Donovan Irving. He had saved her farm, asked nothing in return, and sealed himself into a life with a woman he did not know. The whole thing was insane. It would never work. But as she finally drifted toward sleep, Olivia found herself thinking about the gentleness in his hands when he helped her dismount, the way he had called her wife with such careful respect, the bone-deep loneliness she had seen in his eyes that matched her own. Maybe insanity was exactly what they both needed. Morning came with the sound of hammer strikes. Olivia dressed quickly and hurried outside to find Donovan already at work on the barn, shoring up the sagging wall with new timber he must have found somewhere on the property. "You should have woken me," she called. He turned, shirtless in the early heat, sweat already glistening on his shoulders. "You needed rest. This could wait." But clearly he had not thought it could wait, because he had been up with the dawn starting repairs. Olivia brought him water from the well and watched as he worked. His body told stories in scars, a long white line across his ribs, a puckered mark on his left shoulder that looked like a bullet wound, burns on both forearms. "What happened to you?" she asked quietly. Donovan took the water dipper and drank deeply before answering. "Life happened. Most of these are from ranch work. Cattle are not gentle creatures. One is from a fight I should have walked away from. Another is from a fire I ran into instead of away from." He met her eyes. "I am not a saint, Olivia, but I am not a villain either. Just a man who has lived hard and carries the marks to prove it." "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore." He handed back the dipper. "Old pain fades. It is the new kind that cuts deep." She wanted to ask what new pain he meant, but something in his expression stopped her. Instead, she said, "I should help. Tell me what needs doing." They worked together through the morning, Donovan directing repairs while Olivia fetched tools and held boards steady. The sun climbed higher and the temperature rose, but there was something satisfying about the work, about seeing visible progress. By midday, the barn wall stood straight and strong. "We need livestock," Donovan said, surveying their work. "Chickens at least, maybe some pigs." "I saw good grazing land on the north section. We could run cattle there if we rebuild the fences." "That takes money." "We have money." He wiped sweat from his face. "That is the whole point, Olivia. We use what I saved to make this place profitable again. Then we have a real future instead of just survival." The word future hung between them, heavy with implication. Olivia looked at this man, her husband, and felt the first stirrings of something beyond gratitude. He was not just saving her farm, he was building them a life. "Why did you really come?" she asked. "The truth this time." Donovan was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Finally, he said, "Because 5 years ago I spent 2 months watching you from a distance and wishing I had the courage to stay. Because I memorized your name and never forgot your face. Because when I heard about your troubles, it seemed like fate giving me a second chance at something I had been too scared to reach for the first time." The confession hung in the hot air between them. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. "You heard about my troubles," she repeated. "How railroad men talk, word travels. I was in Boise when someone mentioned Clayton Morris was pressuring the Whitmore widow to sell her dead parents' farm." His jaw tightened. "I caught the next train north." "You could have just offered money. You did not have to marry me." "Yes, I did." He held her gaze steadily. "Because money alone would not stop Morris, but a husband would. And because I have been half in love with you since I was 19 years old, and this seemed like the only chance I would ever get to see if you could feel anything for me in return." The world seemed to tilt. Olivia reached out to steady herself on the barn wall, trying to process what he had just told her. He had been in love with her for 5 years. He had ridden across the territory to save her based on a few brief conversations, and a memory he had carried like a talisman. "That is insane," she whispered. "I know." A faint smile touched his lips. "But here we are anyway. I do not know what I feel. I am not asking you to." Donovan stepped closer, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his brown eyes. "I am just asking you to let me stay. Let me work beside you. Give me time to prove I can be a good husband. What you feel after that is entirely your choice." Olivia looked at this sunburned cowboy who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to speak. She thought about his gentleness, his hard work, his honesty about the pain he carried. She thought about how alone she had been and how alive she felt standing this close to him. "All right," she said. "We will try." The smile that broke across Donovan's face was like sunrise. "Thank you." They rode into town the next day to order supplies. Kennewick's general store was run by Martha Davies, a sharp-eyed woman who missed nothing and forgot even less. She registered Olivia's marriage with interest and Donovan's large order with satisfaction. "Starting over, are you?" Martha asked as she tallied lumber, chicken feed, and seed. "Something like that," Olivia replied carefully. "Good for you, dear. That farm has too much history to let it die." Martha's gaze shifted to Donovan. "You are the railroad man who was here before." "Yes, madam. You came back for her." It was not a question. "Yes, madam," Donovan repeated. Martha nodded slowly, approval evident in her expression. "Well then, I will have everything delivered by week's end." They were leaving the store when a voice called out behind them. "Olivia Whitmore, or should I say Olivia Irving now?" Clayton Morris stood in the street, flanked by two of his ranch hands. He was a broad man in his late 40s, well-dressed and conscious of his power. His expression was pleasant, but something cold lived behind his eyes. "Mr. Morris," Olivia said evenly, "I heard interesting news yesterday." Morris stepped closer, his gaze moving between her and Donovan. "You got married quite suddenly." "Personal matters often are sudden," Donovan said. His voice remained level, but Olivia felt tension coil through his body. "I do not believe we have met." Morris extended a hand. "Clayton Morris. I own the largest ranch in the territory." Donovan shook the offered hand briefly. "Donovan Irving. I own a small farm and a wife I would do anything to protect." The message was clear. Morris's smile tightened. How fortunate for Olivia to find such a devoted husband so quickly. And so convenient, given her financial troubles. "Those troubles are resolved," Donovan said. "Are they?" Morris raised an eyebrow. "A farm that size requires constant investment. I wonder how long a cowboy's savings will last. Long enough." Donovan's hand found the small of Olivia's back, a gesture of support and possession. "And if they run out, I know how to work. We will manage." "Of course." Morris tipped his hat. "Well, congratulations on your marriage. I am sure we will be seeing more of each other." He walked away, his men following. Olivia released a breath she had not known she was holding. "He will cause trouble," she said quietly. "Let him try." Donovan guided her toward their horse. "Men like that are used to getting their way through intimidation. But I learned a long time ago not to be intimidated." "What did you learn instead?" "To protect what is mine." He helped her mount, his hands steady on her waist. "And you are mine now, Olivia, for better or worse." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in her belly. She was married to this man. He had claimed her publicly, defended her without hesitation, promised to stand between her and anyone who threatened what was theirs. That night, she could not sleep. Olivia lay in her bed listening to the silence from across the hall and wondered what Donovan was doing. Was he sleeping? Lying awake thinking about her? Did he regret his impulsive proposal now that reality was settling in? She was still awake when she heard him cry out. Olivia was on her feet before she had fully processed the sound. She crossed the hall and pushed open his door without thinking. Moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating Donovan thrashing in the bed, tangled in sheets and clearly trapped in a nightmare. "No," he gasped. "Not again. Please, not again." She was beside the bed in an instant, her hand on his shoulder. "Donovan, wake up. You are dreaming." He came awake with a strangled sound, his hand catching her wrist in a grip that was almost painful. For a moment his eyes were wild, unfocused. Then recognition flooded in and he released her immediately. "Olivia." His voice was ragged. "I am sorry, I did not mean to wake you. What were you dreaming about?" He sat up, running shaking hands through his sweat-dampened hair. In the moonlight she could see how pale he had gone. "Nothing. Just old memories." "Donovan." She sat on the edge of the bed. "You promised honesty between us." He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, the words came slow and painful. "There was a fire 2 years ago on a ranch in Texas. The owner's daughter was trapped in the bunkhouse. I got her out, but I could not save the others." His hands clenched into fists. "5 men died because I was not fast enough. That is not your fault. I was foreman. They were my responsibility. You ran into a burning building. You saved someone's life and failed to save 5 others." The anguish in his voice cut through her. "I see their faces every night. I hear them screaming. That is why I left Texas. That is why I have been running. Because everywhere I went, I could still smell the smoke." Olivia understood then why he had been so desperate for a home, for a place to belong. He was not running from danger or the law. He was running from guilt that was eating him alive. "You cannot carry that alone," she said softly. "I have to. It is mine to carry." "Not anymore." She reached out and took his hand, feeling him tremble. "You have a wife now. That means your burdens are mine too." Donovan looked at her with something close to wonder. "Why would you want that?" "Because everyone deserves someone to stand beside them in the dark." She squeezed his hand. "You saved me, Donovan. Maybe I can save you too." He made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into his arms. Olivia went willingly, wrapping herself around him as he buried his face in her shoulder. She felt wetness on her neck and realized he was crying, silently, his whole body shaking with the force of it. She held him through it, one hand stroking his hair, murmuring wordless comfort. When the storm finally passed, he did not pull away. They sat tangled together in the moonlight, breathing in sync. "Stay," he whispered against her neck. "Please, just until I fall asleep." "All right." They lay down together, Donovan's arms still around her. Olivia rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heart. She meant to stay only until he slept, but the warmth of his body and the security of his embrace pulled her under. She woke to sunlight and the realization that she was still in Donovan's bed, still wrapped in his arms. He was awake too, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Good morning," he said quietly. "I fell asleep." "I noticed." His hand came up to brush hair from her face, the gesture achingly tender. "Thank you for last night. You do not need to thank me." "Yes, I do." He traced the line of her jaw with his thumb. "No one has seen me that broken before." "You could have left, but you stayed." "We are married," she said simply. "That is what people do for each other." Something shifted in his expression. Before she could process what she saw there, he was leaning in, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was nothing like the chaste brush at their wedding. This kiss was deep and searching, full of gratitude and need and something else that made her heart race. Olivia kissed him back without thinking, her hands fisting in his shirt. Heat flooded through her as his tongue traced her lower lip, requesting entrance she gave willingly. The kiss deepened, and she forgot why this might be too fast, too much. All she knew was that she wanted more. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Donovan rested his forehead against hers. "We should slow down, probably. I want to do this right, court you properly. We are already married. All the more reason to do it right." He kissed her forehead and, with visible reluctance, released her. "Let me make you breakfast." Olivia watched him dress, admiring the play of muscle beneath scarred skin. Her body hummed with unfulfilled desire, but something warm and sweet was blooming in her chest too. Donovan wanted to court her. This man who had already married her wanted to prove he deserved her affection. How was she supposed to protect her heart against that? The supplies arrived as promised. Donovan spent the next week in constant motion, rebuilding fences, reinforcing the barn, preparing fields for planting. Olivia worked beside him, and gradually the farm began to look like a real homestead again instead of a slowly dying dream. But it was the evenings she treasured most. After supper, Donovan would sit with her on the porch and they would talk. He told her about the places he had been, the things he had seen. She told him about her parents, about growing up on the frontier, about her dreams for the farm. Slowly, they wove together the separate threads of their lives. He was funny, she discovered. Behind the serious cowboy exterior lived a man with a dry wit and a talent for storytelling. He made her laugh until her sides hurt, describing a cattle drive that went spectacularly wrong. He listened with complete attention when she talked about her mother's flower garden and how she wanted to restore it. And every night, he walked her to her bedroom door, kissed her sweetly, and went to his own room across the hall. The restraint was clearly costing him. She could see desire in his eyes, feel tension humming through him when they touched. But he held to his promise to court her properly, and she loved him a little more for it each day. Loved him. The realization struck her one morning as she watched him teaching a new calf to drink from a bucket, his voice patient and gentle. She loved Donovan Irving. Loved his strength and his vulnerability, his hard work and tender touches, the way he made her feel safe and desired and valued all at once. She was still processing this revelation when he looked up and caught her staring. "What?" "Nothing," she smiled. "I am just appreciating the view." Color rose in his cheeks, visible even beneath his tan. "You are a dangerous woman, Olivia Irving." "Good." She walked to him, bold with her newfound certainty. "Maybe I am tired of being proper and patient." Donovan straightened slowly, his eyes darkening. "What are you saying?" I am saying we have been married for 3 weeks. She stopped directly in front of him. I am saying I know what I want now. Olivia. His voice was rough. I do not want you to feel rushed. I do not feel rushed. I feel like I have been waiting my entire life for you. She reached up to cup his face. Make love to me, Donovan. Make this marriage real. He searched her eyes, looking for doubt or hesitation. When he found only certainty and desire, something in him broke loose. He kissed her with all the passion he had been holding back, his hands sliding into her hair, tilting her head to deepen the angle. Olivia surrendered to him, to the heat that had been building between them since that first night she had held him through his nightmares. When he lifted her into his arms and carried her toward the house, she wrapped herself around him and held on. Their first time was urgent and a little awkward, both of them fumbling with unfamiliar buttons and trying to find the right rhythm. But it was also beautiful. Donovan's hands reverent on her skin, his voice breaking as he whispered how long he had wanted this, how perfect she was. Olivia gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back. The pleasure built slowly at first, then crested in a wave that left her gasping his name. Donovan followed a moment later, his face buried in her neck as he shuddered through his release. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her bed, the sheets pooled around them. Donovan's hand traced lazy patterns on her stomach. I love you, he said quietly. I have loved you since I was 19 and too much a coward to say so. I love you now with everything I am. Olivia turned in his arms to face him. I love you too. I did not plan to, but you made it impossible not to. The joy that transformed his face was worth every moment of uncertainty, every fear that had led to this. He kissed her again, slow and deep, and she felt the promise in it. This was just the beginning. Summer turned to fall. The wheat crop came in better than expected, and Donovan sold it in town for a solid profit. They bought more livestock, expanded the vegetable garden, made plans for next year's planting. The farm was thriving, and so was their marriage. Clayton Morris watched it all with barely concealed frustration. He made a few more attempts at intimidation, veiled offers to buy the land, hints that accidents could happen to careless farmers. But Donovan faced him down every time with calm certainty, and eventually Morris seemed to accept defeat, or so they thought. It was late October when the trouble came. Olivia was in town buying supplies when she overheard two of Morris's ranch hands talking outside the general store. Boss says to move on it next week, one said. Fire will make it look accidental, and the cowboy will be too busy trying to save his precious wheat to cause trouble. What about the woman? Morris does not care what happens to her. Says once Irving is dealt with, she will have no choice but to sell. Ice flooded through Olivia's veins. She finished her business quickly and rode home as fast as she dared, arriving to find Donovan working on the new chicken coop. We have a problem, she said breathlessly and told him what she had heard. Donovan's expression turned to stone. When? Next week, they said. Then we have time to prepare. He set down his tools. This is my fault. I should have known Morris would not give up so easily. How is this your fault? You are not the one threatening arson. But I am the one who challenged a powerful man and expected him to just accept it. Donovan paced, his mind clearly working through options. We need help. I am good, but I cannot watch the whole property alone. Who could we ask? He was quiet for a moment, then said, I know someone. A man I worked with in Texas before the fire. He is good in a fight and he owes me a favor. I can send a telegram today. Will he come, if he can? Donovan pulled her close. I will not let Morris hurt you, Olivia, I swear it. The telegram went out that afternoon. 2 days later, a lanky cowboy with a scarred face and cold eyes rode up to their door. He introduced himself as Jack Sterling, and the way Donovan's whole demeanor relaxed told Olivia this was someone he trusted absolutely. "Heard you got yourself a wife," Jack said, tipping his hat to Olivia. "Congratulations." "Thank you for coming," Donovan said. "I would not have asked if it was not serious. You ran into a burning building for my sister. There is nothing you could ask that I would refuse." Jack's expression hardened. "Tell me about this cattle baron who needs a lesson in manners." Over supper, they made plans. Jack would camp out in the barn, watching for anyone who approached after dark. Donovan would take the house. They would work in shifts, one sleeping while the other kept vigil. And if Morris's men came, they would be ready. The waiting was terrible. Every night, Olivia went to bed alone while Donovan patrolled their property, rifle in hand. She hated the fear that had invaded their home, hated that their happiness was threatened by one man's greed. On the fifth night, she woke to the sound of shouting. Olivia was out of bed in an instant, pulling on her robe as she ran for the window. In the yard below, she saw Donovan and Jack confronting three men on horseback. One of them held a torch. She grabbed her father's rifle from the drawer and ran downstairs. By the time she reached the yard, the confrontation had escalated. The man with the torch had dismounted and was advancing on Donovan. Jack had the other two covered with his rifle. "This does not concern you, Cowboy," the man with the torch snarled. "Morris wants this land and he is going to get it." "Over my dead body," Donovan said flatly. "That can be arranged." The man lunged. Donovan sidestepped and brought the butt of his rifle up hard, catching his attacker in the stomach. The torch fell, and Donovan kicked it away from the dry grass. The fight devolved quickly into a brutal close-quarters brawl. Olivia raised her rifle, covering the two mounted men. "Get off my land." They looked at her, at Jack's steady aim, at their companion getting thoroughly beaten by Donovan's fists. Smart men would have ridden away. These men reached for their guns. Jack fired first, shooting the gun from one man's hand. Olivia did not hesitate. She aimed at the second man's shoulder and squeezed the trigger. The recoil knocked her back a step, but her aim was true. The man howled and clutched his arm. "Next one goes through your heart," she said calmly, chambering another round. "Leave. Now." They fled, their injured companion struggling into the saddle and following as fast as he could ride. Donovan finished with his opponent, leaving the man unconscious in the dirt. "We need to take this one to the sheriff," Jack said. "Get him talking before Morris can silence him." By sunrise, they were in town with their prisoner and a full accounting of the attempted arson. Sheriff Dalton listened with growing anger, especially when their captive, faced with jail time, started talking about Clayton Morris's orders. By noon, the sheriff and a deputy rode out to Morris's ranch. By sunset, Clayton Morris was under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson and attempted murder. The trial was quick. Morris fought the charges, but too many people came forward with stories of intimidation and threats. The ranch hand Olivia had shot testified in exchange for leniency, confirming Morris had ordered the attack. In the end, the cattle baron was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Jack stayed for another week, helping Donovan reinforce their security and enjoying Olivia's cooking. When he finally saddled up to leave, he shook Donovan's hand and kissed Olivia's cheek. "You found a good one," he told Donovan. "Do not mess it up." "I will not," Donovan promised. They stood together watching Jack ride away, Olivia wrapped in her husband's arms. "Is it really over?" she asked. "It is really over." He kissed the top of her head. "We are safe now." That night, for the first time in weeks, they slept peacefully in each other's arms. Winter came and brought with it a different kind of challenge. The snow piled high and the temperature dropped, keeping them largely confined to the house. But Olivia did not mind. She spent the long evenings curled against Donovan in front of the fire, reading aloud while he whittled small figures from scrap wood. She learned more about him during those quiet months. He told her about his family, lost to illness when he was 17. He told her about the years of drifting, looking for something he could not name. And he told her again, in a dozen different ways, how much he loved her. Olivia gave him her own stories in return. She told him about the lonely years after her parents died, about the fear that had driven her to consider suicide, about how close she had come to giving up entirely. And she thanked him, again and again, for saving her life in more ways than one. "We saved each other," Donovan said one night, his hand resting on her belly. "You gave me a reason to stop running. I gave you a reason to keep fighting. That is what love is supposed to do." By spring, Olivia had news that made both of them weep with joy. She was pregnant. The baby would come in the fall, a new life to fill the house that had been too empty for too long. Donovan became even more protective, if that was possible. He would not let her lift anything heavy or work too long in the garden. He built a cradle from pine wood, each piece sanded smooth and fitted perfectly. And every night he talked to her growing belly, telling their child stories about the farm it would inherit and the parents who already loved it beyond measure. In September, when the wheat was golden and ready for harvest, Olivia went into labor. Mrs. Davies came to help, shooing Donovan out of the room despite his protests. "This is women's work," Martha said firmly. "You can pace in the parlor like every other nervous father." The labor was long and hard. Olivia had not expected the pain to be so consuming, so relentless. But every time she felt herself weakening, she thought about Donovan waiting on the other side of the door and found the strength to push. Finally, as the sun was setting, a thin wail filled the bedroom. Martha wrapped the baby in a clean blanket and placed the tiny bundle in Olivia's arms. "A son," she said, smiling, "healthy and strong." Olivia looked down at her baby boy, at his red face and flailing fists, and fell completely in love for the second time in her life. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome home." Martha opened the door and called for Donovan. He burst into the room like a man who had been holding his breath for hours, his eyes wild until they landed on Olivia and the baby in her arms. "A boy," Olivia said, tears streaming down her face. "We have a son." Donovan approached slowly, reverently, as if afraid he might break something. When he finally held his son for the first time, his hands were shaking. "He is perfect," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are perfect. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for this." They named him Samuel, after the reverend who had married them and after the second chance they had both been given. He was a good baby, fussy only when hungry and otherwise content to sleep or observe the world with solemn eyes. Donovan proved to be a natural father. He changed diapers without complaint, walked Samuel through the house during fussy nights, and could be found more than once just sitting beside the cradle watching his son sleep with wonder on his face. "I never thought I would have this," he told Olivia one night as they lay in bed, exhausted but happy. "A wife I love, a son, a home that is truly mine. It feels like a dream." "If it is a dream, we are both having it," she said, kissing him softly. "This is real, Donovan. This is our life." Years passed. The farm prospered under their joint care, growing from a struggling homestead into a genuinely profitable operation. They hired help during harvest season and became known throughout Kennewick as fair employers who treated their workers well. Samuel grew into a sturdy, cheerful boy who loved following his father around the farm, imitating everything Donovan did. 2 years after Samuel came a daughter, Emma, who had her mother's determination and her father's gentle heart. 3 years after Emma came another son, Daniel, who was fearless and wild and kept them all running. The house that had once been so empty filled with noise and laughter, with the chaos of childhood and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. Olivia looked around her table at supper each night and could hardly believe this was her reality. She had been so close to losing everything, and now she had more than she had ever dreamed possible. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Donovan gave her a garden. He had spent months secretly preparing the plot near the house, planting all her mother's favorite flowers. When he led her to it that morning, Olivia cried at the beauty of it. "You said you wanted to restore your mother's garden," he said, holding her close. "So I did it for you. This must have cost a fortune in seeds. You are worth every penny." He kissed her temple. "You are worth everything, Olivia. These 10 years with you have been the best of my life." "Mine too," she said, turning in his arms to kiss him properly. "I love you, Donovan Irving. Thank you for saving my farm." "Thank you for saving my soul," he replied. They made love that night with the windows open, the scent of flowers drifting in on the breeze. Afterward, Olivia lay with her head on Donovan's chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong. "Do you still have nightmares?" she asked quietly. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but they are getting rarer. When I wake up scared now, I reach for you and remember I am home. That helps more than anything." "Good." She kissed his chest. "Because you are home, Donovan. You will always be home here." More years passed. The children grew taller and the farm grew more prosperous. Donovan's hair started graying at the temples, and Olivia found smile lines deepening around her eyes. They were aging together, growing into the life they had built from desperation and determination. Samuel turned out to have a gift for working with animals. At 16, he was already helping train horses for neighboring ranches. Emma inherited her father's skill with wood and spent hours in the workshop building increasingly complex projects. Daniel was still deciding what he loved most, trying a bit of everything with enthusiastic chaos. Donovan watched his children with the same wonder he had shown the day Samuel was born. "We made good humans," he told Olivia one evening as they sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard. "We did," she agreed, leaning into his side. "They are going to do great things. Just like their mother." He kissed her hair. "You know, I have been thinking about that day I rode up to your farm, how close I came to talking myself out of it, how terrified I was that you would reject me." "I almost did," Olivia admitted. "It seemed too desperate, too crazy. And now I thank God every day that we were both desperate and crazy enough to take the chance." She looked up at him. "You saved me, Donovan, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," he corrected gently. "That is what I have been trying to tell you for 17 years. I needed saving just as much as you did. You gave me purpose, hope, a reason to stop running from my past. You gave me a future worth living for. Then we are even," she said, smiling. "No." He cupped her face in his weathered hands. "I will never be even with you, Olivia Irving. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you and probably failing, but I will love you every single day while I try." She kissed him then. There on the porch in the fading light, while their children played and the farm they had built together stretched out around them. It was not the life either of them had planned, but it was the life they had chosen, crafted from courage and need, and a desperate proposal that had somehow turned into the greatest love story either of them could have imagined. The years continued to pass, kind in the way they moved gently over the Irving family. Samuel fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher and married her in a ceremony that filled the farm with music and laughter. Emma took over the workshop entirely and started selling her furniture in Boise, her pieces sought after for their quality and artistry. Daniel surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, his wild energy channeled into educating the next generation of Kennewick children. Donovan and Olivia became grandparents, then grandparents again. Their house regularly filled with the chaos of visiting grandchildren who loved hearing stories about how Grandpa had ridden in one day and married Grandma to save the farm. "Tell us about when you first kissed," their oldest granddaughter begged one evening. Olivia laughed. "That is not a story for children." "The first kiss was at the wedding," Donovan said, winking at Olivia. "Very proper and boring. The important kiss came later." "When?" Several small voices demanded. "When your grandma convinced me she loved me back," Donovan said, reaching for Olivia's hand. "That kiss was worth waiting for." On their 30th anniversary, their children threw them a party that brought half of Kennewick to the farm. Olivia wore a new dress Emma had made for her, and Donovan wore his best suit, though he complained about the tie until Samuel straightened it for him. They danced in the barn they had repaired together 3 decades ago, surrounded by the community they had become part of, the family they had built, and the love that had sustained them through every challenge. 30 years, Olivia said, looking up at her husband's weathered, beloved face. "How did we get so lucky?" "It was not luck," Donovan replied. "It was courage. You had the courage to trust a desperate cowboy with a wild proposal. I had the courage to make that proposal in the first place. Everything else followed from that. Do you ever regret it? Coming here, tying yourself to me and this farm?" "Never." The word was absolute, no hesitation. "This is exactly where I was always meant to be, with you." As the party continued around them, Olivia rested her head on Donovan's shoulder and thought about the girl she had been, standing in her doorway with a revolver in her pocket and death in her heart. That girl could never have imagined this life, this love, this abundance of joy. But that girl had made the brave choice to trust a stranger, and that stranger had proven himself worthy of that trust every single day since. Years later, when they were both old and gray, sitting in rocking chairs on the porch they had rebuilt twice, Olivia asked Donovan if he remembered the telegram he had sent her. "Every word," he said. "Arriving Wednesday stop will marry you to save farm stop no conditions stop." "You were wrong about the no conditions part," she said. "How so?" "You conditioned me to expect joy, to believe in second chances, to know what real love looks like." She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "Those are pretty significant conditions, Donovan Irving." He laughed, the sound still warm and rich even though his body had grown frail. "I suppose they are. Do you object?" "Not even a little bit." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the fields they had planted together, the barn they had built together, the life they had created from desperation and determination and love. "Thank you," Donovan said quietly. "For what?" "For saying yes. For giving me a home. For saving me when I thought I was beyond saving." He brought her hand to his lips. "For loving me." "Thank you for coming back," she replied. "For being brave enough to offer marriage to a desperate woman, for working beside me, for giving me reasons to live when I had run out of them." She squeezed his hand. "For loving me first, always," he said. "In this life and whatever comes after, Olivia, always." They were both still sitting there, hands intertwined, when their granddaughter found them an hour later. The sunset had faded to twilight and peace had settled over the farm like a blessing. "Grandpa tells the best stories," the little girl announced. "Yes, he does," Olivia agreed, smiling at her husband. "Will you tell me another one?" their granddaughter asked. "About when you were young." Donovan exchanged a look with Olivia and something passed between them that needed no words. "When your grandma and I were young," he began, "we were both lost. The world seemed very dark and very hard, but then we found each other and everything changed." "How?" the child asked, climbing into Olivia's lap. "Love," Olivia said simply. We chose to love each other even when it was scary and uncertain, and that choice made all the difference. Is that the secret? Their granddaughter asked. To being happy. Donovan reached over and stroked his wife's cheek, his touch as gentle as it had been 35 years ago when he first held her through her nightmares. Yes, he said. That is the secret. Find someone worth being brave for and then be brave every single day. I want a love like yours when I grow up, the little girl announced. You will have whatever kind of love you choose, Olivia told her. But I hope it is as true and deep as what your grandpa and I found. Nothing in this world is better than that. As darkness fell completely, they went inside together, 3 generations under one roof. The house was warm and filled with laughter, the kitchen table groaned under the weight of a good meal, and love lived in every corner. Later, much later, when the house was quiet and everyone else was asleep, Donovan and Olivia lay in their bed, the same bed they had shared for over 3 decades. His arm was around her shoulders, her head rested in the hollow of his throat where it fit perfectly. Are you happy? She asked, the same question she had asked 100 times over the years. Happier than I ever thought possible, he answered, the same answer he always gave. You? So happy I could burst with it, she said. They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other and the life they had built. 2 people who had been offered a second chance and grabbed it with both hands. The farm would continue after them, passed down to their children and their children's children. But the love would continue too, living on in the stories told and the example set. Proof that even the most desperate beginnings could lead to the most beautiful endings. Outside, the Idaho wind whispered through the wheat fields, carrying with it the promise of another harvest, another season, another day in the life of the farm that had been saved by a cowboy's desperate proposal and a woman's brave acceptance. The land endured, as it always had and always would, witness to the love story that had unfolded upon it. And somewhere, in whatever realm exists beyond this one, the universe smiled at the 2 souls who had found each other against all odds, who had healed each other's wounds, and who had proven that salvation sometimes comes in the most unexpected packages, delivered by a dusty cowboy on a Wednesday afternoon with nothing to offer but everything that mattered. The years continued their gentle march, and the Irving family continued to thrive. When Donovan passed in his sleep at 72, surrounded by his wife and children, his last words were thank you. Olivia held his hand as he slipped away, and though her heart broke, she was grateful they had been given so many years together. She lived another 5 years after that, spending her days in the garden Donovan had built for her, and her evenings telling stories to grandchildren and great-grandchildren about the cowboy who had saved her farm and stolen her heart. When she finally joined him, it was peacefully in her sleep, with a smile on her face. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the farm, under a stone that read simply, Donovan and Olivia Irving. They saved each other. And the farm continued, generation after generation, built on a foundation of love that began with a desperate telegram and a brave woman who chose to trust. The story of how Grandma and Grandpa met became family legend, told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the bravest leaps of faith. In the end, that was what it had all been about. Faith, courage, the willingness to reach for hope even when surrounded by darkness. Donovan had reached across distance and time, driven by a 5-year-old memory and a desperate need to belong somewhere. Olivia had reached back, equally desperate, equally brave. And together, they had built something that outlasted them both. A love story for the ages. A family that would carry their names and their values forward. A farm that stood as testament to what two people could accomplish when they refused to give up on each other or themselves. The Wild West was full of stories of violence and hardship, of struggles and losses. But it was also full of stories like theirs. Stories of ordinary people making extraordinary choices. Stories of love blooming in the harshest conditions. Stories that proved again and again that the human spirit was stronger than any adversity. Donovan and Olivia's story was one of those. A cowboy and a farmer's daughter, both broken in their own ways, both needing saving. They found each other at exactly the right moment, when hope was almost lost but not quite gone. And from that meeting, that desperate proposal and brave acceptance, came a lifetime of love and laughter and belonging. It was not always easy. There were hard seasons and lean years, sickness and sorrow, moments when the weight of responsibility felt crushing. But they carried it together, sharing the burden and the joy, and that made all the difference in the end. That is what the story was really about. Not just romance or rescue, but partnership. Two people who chose each other every single day, who worked side by side to build something lasting, who held each other through nightmares and celebrated together in moments of triumph. They were not perfect. No one is. But they were perfect for each other, two puzzle pieces that fit together despite coming from different boxes entirely. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The sun set over the Irving farm one more time, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. The wheat swayed in the evening breeze, ready for harvest. The barn stood strong and true, rebuilt and reinforced so many times it was hard to say which pieces were original. The house glowed with warm light, filled with the current generation of Irvings making dinner and homework and memories. And on the hill, two stones stood side by side, marking the resting place of the couple who had started it all. The cowboy who offered marriage to save her farm. The woman who discovered he needed saving too. The love story that proved salvation runs both ways. Their story was over, but its echoes would continue forever, living on in the family they created, the farm they built, and the lesson they taught about courage and faith and the transformative power of love. They had saved each other, and in doing so, created something beautiful that would endure long after they were gone. That was their legacy. That was their triumph. Two desperate people who took a chance on each other and built a life that exceeded both their wildest dreams. A cowboy and his bride. A partnership forged in necessity and tempered in love. A story that deserved to be told and remembered and celebrated. And so it was.